All right. So it seems that we have one person on board. I'm aware that this is completely unplanned, no pre-notice or anything like that. So let's see if some people will show up or not. Just announced this 5 minutes ago, so we'll give it a couple of minutes. And we'll just set up here and see what happens. Okay, we've got some folks coming in. Yeah, like I was just saying, this is a completely unscheduled live chat, but why not? I had some time on my hands, and yeah, I thought it was cool to hang out with you guys. So yeah, like I said, the topic for the live chat is open, which means that anything related to 3D, just bring it on. Ask and you will receive an answer, right? Well, thank you, Canada Love. You know, Canada is near and dear to my heart, don't you? For those of you who don't know, I grew up in Canada, so I love Canada too. Let's see. Getting some first questions in here. So San925 is saying, I'm new to Maya. Just want to ask how I can make organic works or objects or models, right? Okay, so let me see. Organic modeling. Well, normally when it comes to organic modeling, there's a distinction between hard surface modeling, let's say anything that has never been organic or never has been alive, or anything that has been, like animals, humans, and so forth. Now, most people in the industry will use sculpting tools for that. So, for example, sculpting in Maya, or more importantly, sculpting in ZBrush, right? So if ZBrush is what you're using to sculpt, how that typically would work is you would either start directly in ZBrush, you would create a high poly model in ZBrush, you would sculpt that, and then you would use a retopology program to create your low poly model, and then you can do the baking and so forth. So hopefully that answers your question. You mentioned that you were new, so maybe I'm telling you a couple of things that you didn't know just yet, right? Just let me know. Right, so let's see, the question, are you running your channel with the commercial version of Maya? Yes and no. I have a special educator agreement with Autodesk because I'm also in their partner program, you know, because they feel that I promote Maya. So it is it's an educator license, but I do have a commercial license that I use for commercial stuff, right? In Brazil, it's 4:45. So my next question would be, what are you doing up at 4:45? But then again, if you're a 3D artist, then I understand. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Hey, Nazar. So anything 3D, guys, anything related to the 3D industry, to work, to software, hardware, jobs, freelance stuff, gaming, etc., etc. Alrighty, let's see. Any tips for new Maya users to remember most of the useful tools? Well, that's kind of hard because I kind of need to know exactly what people know when they just get started. But I would say the basis for any 3D modeling software would be the manipulation of three things, which is faces, edges, or vertices, right? So all the tools that are related to those are important, of course. And in Maya specifically, how do you select a Maya face, edge, or vertex, and how do you manipulate it? So what are the controls for moving, scaling, and rotating? And then I would say one of the most important ones would be bevel and insert edge loops. So if you know that, you can get started and then take it from there. Let's see. Just trying to catch up on what you guys are writing, sorry. Can I do more videos about XGen? I'm actually working on something, so I'll see if I can do that soon. Let's see, what's a good tool in my end? Not many people know or use often. Well, a question from Sam Gonzalez. What I see very few people use is the crease tool, crease edge tool. Basically, if you want to harden an edge in an object so it shows up better in a render, and you don't want to add edge loops because you have a polycount restriction, by using the crease edge tool, you get harder edges without doing that. So that's something that is a good thing, I would say. Okay, question from K Rex. I'm a junior lighting artist and was wondering if you have any advice for lighters. Oh, I do, for sure. I don't know if you saw my video yesterday, but when it comes to lighting, and I actually talked about practical lighting yesterday, what I see very often is that light in scenes is completely off. Now, I gave the example of a man walking on a path in the desert in the middle of the night, and the only light source, excuse me, the only light source is the moon. Now, the moon's behind the character, but you still see light directly on the face of that character. So there's no reasonable explanation of where that light is coming from. And that's just off, right? So my tip would be to look carefully at movies, whether it's animated or real life, right? And basically write down lighting schedules. So not only in movies, but also in real life. If you're, let's say, sitting in a waiting room, take a piece of paper, make a sketch. Okay, so what room am I sitting in? What are the light sources? Maybe a light in the ceiling, maybe light coming through the window. What direction is it coming from, and how does it hit the objects, right? And if you make a simple sketch of that, it will give you a much better understanding of what appropriate lighting is, and that will make your scenes look a lot more natural, okay? So let me know if that answers your question. Let's see. Find Substance Painter a bit difficult to learn. Yeah, I can imagine that, but it's not too complicated. Let's see. Switching to Keyshot, is that a good idea? Zeus TV is asking. Well, for the most part, Keyshot is a rendering platform, right? I mean, you can do some animation, you can rotate your object and whatnot, but for the most part, it's texturing and rendering. If you are in the presentation business, as in product presentation, design and whatnot, I think it would be a very good choice. If you are looking to render things like, I don't know, characters and whatnot, you can definitely use it. A lot of people do. But I personally, if I were into characters, I would probably use something like Substance Painter, or just go in and use the render like Arnold, for example, or Redshift, right? Let's see, what else? Okay, so Canada Love is saying, what book would I suggest? Well, can you tell me on what topic? I mean, as far as 3D books are concerned, the only book that I really always recommend is the Animator's Toolkit. It's basically about 2D animation, but all the things in that book apply to 3D animation as well. And it is one of the most valuable books to read on anyone related to animation, in my opinion. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so hello, as a beginner 3D artist, are there any tips or suggestions to hone my skill? I've been looking for blueprints to try and create various stuff, but I can't find much online. Well, what you can do is go to Google and start your search by typing in orthographic view. So orthographic view of a car, orthographic view of, and so on and so on. And then look for images, and you'll find images that are shown from all angles, top, bottom, front, side, and so forth. And you can use that, for modeling. Let's see. Oh, good question. So how can I decrease render time? Now, render time is increased by a couple of things. It's increased by reflection, by refraction, by subsurface scattering, and stuff like that. So it calculates light rays. So if you have light going through an object or bouncing off an object, It has to calculate that. That is something that will delay your render a lot. So if you're worried about rendering, or specifically when you're still in your work in progress mode, don't use reflective materials or subsurface scattering, and just use that or apply them or turn them on for your final render. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Canada Love saying a book about a video game design. To be honest, I would not know. That's not something I do a lot. I tend to look up everything online, so not necessarily, reading books. But like I said, the exception would be the Animator Toolkit. Okay, so Kerek saying, in your video yesterday, you mentioned how an artist would look more useful to an employer if they had more skills. Any suggestion on what other skills to focus on as a lighter? Well, in the specific case of a lighter, that is a pretty important task. I would tend to look at things that also define the atmosphere, and I probably need to explain that. So light sets a mood in a scene, right? Now, I personally am heavily into color grading. So study color, apply color, because if you know about light and you also know about color, by color grading footage and assisting the editing process in that way, you have a huge impact on the final look and feel of the footage, right? So I would definitely do that. And hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Mental Depth is saying, I'm from Colombia. I'm working on a little 3D short film for my college final project in Maya, but I want to start working online and be part of international projects. How could I start? Okay, well, for those of you who are not a member of my Hangout group on Facebook, I'll give you a quick link. Hang on. I'll just put the link in down here. There you go. So that's a link to my Hangout group on Facebook. Right now, 3,000 artists and counting worldwide in all sorts of disciplines. And the reason why I advise you to join that group is because that is a very good way to build up your network. You will comment on other people's work. People will comment on yours. You will know where they are at. People will ask you to assist in projects, do collaborations or whatnot. And that is by far the best way to start building your career, right? And the whole thing is you need to get noticed and you need to be out there, right? And they're not only people that are 3D artists themselves. Many times they will be offered to do a project. They will not have time because their calendar is full, and they will ask in group if somebody else has time. And that way you can start getting gigs, right? Let's see, what else we got? Okay, so Yaruka is saying, could you type the name of the images? Okay, hang on. Let me just do that. So here's an example. And the way you write that is like this. So I got messages popping up all the time. So an orthographic view is basically a view of an object from top, front, side, and in perspective and so forth. And you can usually use that when you want to practice your modeling. So you can type in orthographic view of a car, orthographic view of, and so on, right? All right, let's see what else. Software. Okay, find the company. Let's see here. A lot of questions. I'm trying to pick out a good one. Okay, so let's see. Rhythm is saying, please tell me the software I need to be learned for doing for becoming a proper 3D artist. All right. Okay, so let me get into that. If you want to be a generalist, so basically a 3D artist that can do a little bit of everything, I would say. Let me start with modeling. First of all, you need to be able to model in 3D. Now, modeling in 3D, you can do that in a lot of platforms. You can use Blender, which is completely free, which is kind of awesome. You can use 3ds Max. You can use Maya. These are basically the main ones. And then you got Cinema 4D. But I would say in the industry, it's mostly Maya and 3ds Max, right? 3ds Max is more towards interiors, is more towards architecture, visualization of products, and so on. Maya is more related to game design, character design, animation, and so on. Now, that's the modeling bit, okay? Then what you see more and more nowadays is digital sculpting. Now, you can do that in 3D Coat. You can do that in previously Mudbox, and I think that's going to disappear. But Mudbox, you can do a little bit of that in Maya. But I would say 99.999% of all people would use ZBrush. Okay, so ZBrush is the platform to do that. Then when it comes to rigging, let's say rigging characters, I would definitely say Maya. Let's see what else. Lighting, animation, Maya as well. And then of course you have the rendering. Now, rendering is a whole different story because you could, for example, use Arnold that comes with Maya, but I see a lot of people using Pixar's RenderMan. I see more people using Redshift. And the whole discussion about rendering is renderers that are CPU based compared to renderers that are GPU based, right? So that's kind of a thing that's going on. So if you're completely new, depending on your budget, because Maya is very expensive, you could decide to, for example, start with Blender and render in Blender, right? So that rhymes. So it wouldn't cost you a cent. Now, that said, if you are new and you want to start learning Maya, because you see Maya and 3ds Max more in the industry, you can go to Autodesk and you can get a free 3-year license if you license yourself as a student, okay? So you get to use it for free. It doesn't cost you a penny. The only restriction is that you cannot use your output for commercial purposes, so you can't sell that stuff. So hopefully, hopefully that answers that question. And then, of course, you got a whole range of other software applications that you can use. Let's see. Sculpting tools for 100 times. Let's see. No, not character modeling has been done in ZBrush. Character sculpting, right? So if you do character development and you're into digital sculpting, and a lot of high poly models are nowadays, especially when it comes to characters, that's almost always done in ZBrush, right? Let's see. If I want to go to cinema, then on which software should I work on mainly? Does that make sense to work with reference? Okay, so if you want to go to cinema, do you mean cinema as in going to the movies, or are you talking about Cinema 4D, the software application? Let's see. But in modeling during getting modeling goal, actually no experience. Say there's an age. Okay, so Cheyenne, and I hope I pronounced your name right, and if not, I apologize. You're saying you're 26 years old, you want to start learning modeling, organic modeling is your goal, but you have absolutely no experience. Would you say there's an age factor of making it and becoming good? Well, I get that question a lot. I would not worry about that at all. I mean, I have people that start when they're 30, when they're 40. I even have people that start when they're 50. At the end of the day, what's important is your output. You know, if you can produce the work and if the work looks good, you know, that's fine. The problem is, though, that typically when you start at a somewhat older age, you have financial responsibilities. Maybe you have a house, rented a house, bought a house. Maybe you got a family. I don't know. And all these financial responsibilities are there, while at the same time you have to study for a brand new career. So it makes things a bit harder, right? Okay, let's see. Regarding lighting and rendering, would you recommend mastering Maya Arnold or Houdini Arnold? I know Houdini is mainly used for FX, but I really love the node-based architecture. All right. So Gianluca, and again, hopefully I pronounced that right. Houdini is node-based, but keep in mind when it comes to anything related to texturing and all that kind of cool stuff, you can do that node-based in Maya as well, right? So as far as FX, Houdini is king, in my opinion, for sure. And if you are able to learn Houdini, I definitely would do that, right? Let's see. All right, starting to monolize. Let me just take a sip of coffee, guys. Okay, so Rhythm is saying that he's talking about movies when he talked about cinema. So what 3D software mainly used in movies is required to create things with their own creativity? Okay. All right, so let me talk a little bit about movies and how that works, right? So for those of you who don't know, I speak at Animago. That's a 3D industry event, and I'm going to do that this year, actually in about, I think it's the 2nd of November, so that's pretty soon. And when it comes to that industry event, you see a lot of things that are created in, for example, Pirates of the Caribbean or other movies, right? And what they will show you is breakdowns. So they will show you exactly what they've done. Now, there are a couple of categories. Let's say you have a scene where a lot of people are on a dock and they're getting on board of the Titanic, right? Now, obviously, the Titanic isn't around anymore, so it's a 3D model. So that is straight up 3D modeling. Now, in addition, you want an environmental scene set up. So you want smoke, you want fog, you want all that kind of stuff. Most likely, that's either done in Maya or Houdini. Now, one thing that you see a lot in movies is you will have characters walking around holding weapons, right? And you would have what they call a hero piece, which is, let's say, a weapon carried by the hero, right? And then you would have people in the background, and they would have maybe plastic weapons because they're way in the back and you don't see the detail anyway, right? Now, sometimes the hero person is going to say, well, that hero piece, that weapon is way too heavy for me to carry around all day long, right? So just, replace it in post. So people will go in and they will substitute that weapon by a better looking one that is completely CG, and it will look like the character is carrying that weapon, right? Well, in fact, he's not. Sometimes it's even to fix continuity issues. Let's say a character, I don't know, Indiana Jones is carrying a whip, right, around his shoulder or whatnot. In the next scene, he doesn't, and then the next scene, he does. So when they find out that that happened, they have to go back and put it in like digitally, right? And things like that, they're usually done in Houdini. So hopefully that answers that. Okay, so let's see. Create the displacement maps, how to personalize. Okay, so Emil Hansen is asking how to create your own displacement maps and how to personalize the displacement maps with houses. I'm not quite sure what you mean. A displacement map is basically a grayscale image similar to a height map. The difference is that a displacement map actually displaces geometry, but I'm not sure what you mean by houses. Let's see, you want to go in animation field, animation capture. Okay, so Nehul, I hope I pronounced that right. I want to go in animation field, but nowadays motion capture is in trend. What should I do now? Well, first of all, mocap is something that is, it's trending, of course, but it kind of depends on what industry you're looking at. I mean, if you're looking at real life movies, they will use mocap for anything that's not strictly human. So let's say robots, cyborgs, maybe dinosaurs, whatever, that kind of thing. They will use mocap to kind of have more realistic motion there. But keep in mind that there's still a tremendous amount of work out there for traditional animators. I mean, people always think about games and movies, but what about commercials on TV? I mean, you got a potato chip commercial, or I don't know, Oreo cookies or whatever. There's so much work out there that people are missing out on because they're strictly focusing on movies and games, right? So let me do a simple question here. Ali is saying, hey man, how are you? I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Let's see. Cartoon animation, need any other software without Maya and Photoshop? I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. Cartoon animation, 2D or 3D? Okay, Gustavo is asking whether I have any tips on how to texture doors. Well, that very much depends on what your workflow is. I'm reading your questions and I'm thinking about the answers, and I'm doing a lot of stuff at the same time. So if I look hesitant, that's why, right? Okay, so if your workflow is, for example, that you create something in Maya, so you model it in Maya, you can then, for example, texture it in Substance Painter, export all the maps and the models from Substance Painter and Maya, and then import them into a game engine. That's one way. But there's also a lot of opportunity to texture straight in the game engine. So it very much depends on your workflow, right? Okay, so Lena is saying, what are some tips to become a matte painter? Now, a matte painter is a very, very different thing. And it's interesting because I don't hear a lot of people about this. Now, it's not 3D, but it's used a lot in the 3D world. Now, for those of you who don't know, matte painting is basically, how am I going to explain this? It's a combination of digital painting and photo editing. So a matte painter would take a number of images, usually based on a concept piece, and will start to edit and paste them together to create a whole new scene. And that is a very cool thing. If you don't know what it is, check it out on YouTube. Like I said, not strictly a 3D job, but something that you would see there. And the best way to become one, I would say, is, to do self-study. So follow a lot of YouTube videos, read books, talk to anybody who's in that profession, and just try to build from there. Let's see. So Interactive Dealers is saying that he recently started to lose some hair and he wants to use XGen. That would work. Let's see. I'm trying to read a question here. Let's see. Luis Lira is saying, hello, hope you have a good week. I'm a 3D rigger, but what do you recommend to complement it? I'm doing in-cloth and grooming with XGen and Houdini hair, but I would like to know your opinion. Well, as I said before, if you can master that in Houdini, I definitely would do that. I mean, at the end of the day, XGen is a plugin. Houdini is a professional platform. My experience, the industry would be way more impressed with you if you had Houdini abilities. Let's see, how to open mental ray objects or projects in V-Ray. Excuse me. Well, basically, you can. Mental Ray is an NVIDIA product. Mental Ray used to be part of Maya. It has been replaced by Arnold. It's a product that was created by NVIDIA, and they stopped doing that. So, Mental Ray is dead completely. And Mental Ray had its own textures and so forth, so that is gone as well. So if you want to render in V-Ray, you would have to apply V-Ray materials. Let's see. Okay, can I tell more about 3D generalists? I can, yeah. Okay, so and I talked about this in my video yesterday as well. When it comes to a 3D generalist, it is basically someone that has a lot of skills in the 3D world. So not just focusing on movies and games, but let's say the Swedish company IKEA wants to have new kitchens for their catalog, right? If you know how to model kitchens, you have a potential job there. Let's say the restaurant across the street needs a 3D logo for their website. If you can do that, you have another chance to make money, right? And what I mean by a generalist is somebody that has enough skill that they can work in basically any industry, whether it's product visualization for a soap manufacturer or a car dealer or anything like that, right? And the more general you are as far as your skills and how you can use them, the more chances are that you will get hired and you will stay hired. Because even at companies where they develop games, if you know more than just modeling, if you also know lighting and texturing and all that kind of stuff, they don't have to go out and hire somebody else. They can ask you, right? Okay, let's see. Interesting question. Any tips on how to market your art better so potential employers would be more likely to see it? Well, let me throw something out there and let's just see how you guys respond. Are you marketing your art or are you marketing your skill? Big difference, right? Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because if I was only interested in your output, your work, right, I would basically be hiring you without knowing anything about you. Now, that would basically say that the person behind the art doesn't matter. And of course it does. If I have a company and I have a team and I want to work with an artist, I want to know something about this artist. Where is he or she at? You know, what is his or her age? What is the background, and so forth and so on. So from a marketing standpoint, my advice would be to start building a personal brand, right? People need to know you in combination with what you do, not just your work. I see a lot of ArtStation pages where there are a lot of models and nothing about the artist whatsoever. On the About page, talk a little bit about who you are, why you are in 3D, what you have done so far, and so on. Okay? All right, let's see. And among class game characters. Oh, long question here. So Anna's saying, I wonder if you could give any advice on modeling clothes for games characters. Should all the clothes be stitched together in one mesh, or retouch stage, and some pieces can be layered like jackets? Okay. All right. So long question. All right. So when it comes to clothing, first of all, let's make a distinction between sequential rendering and real-time rendering. So in other words, is it for a movie or for a game? If it's for a movie, you will have sequential rendering. So you render frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And when it's done, right? So in that case, let's talk about movies. You would have clothing that will move and clothing that will not move. So let's say the character is wearing a shirt. The shirt is a tight fit on the body. If the body moves, the shirt moves. Now, you could model that onto the body as one mesh if you wanted to, right? Now, let's say we're talking about, I don't know, Superman's cape or whatever, right? The cape is going to be dynamic. It's going to move when the character moves and so forth. So I would definitely have that attached to the body, but it would be, like an end cloth object or something like that, right? That you could then dynamically animate or simulate and then, put it into the render when the movie is done. Now, when it comes to games, that's a whole different thing because games render real time. And you always have restrictions when it comes to poly count and so forth, right? Now, in games, again, you have anything that you can basically bake onto the body of the character, you would do that because real-time rendering has a huge impact on system resources. That's always a big thing. You don't want that to happen, right? So you would bake onto the character as much as you can. And if things have to be dynamic, what you would do is something else, which is kind of a trick of the trade, and that is you would work with multiple texture maps. Now, let me explain this. And if you guys lose me, let me know, right? Let's say you have this movie called How to Train a Dragon or something like that. Now, the dragon has scales on his body, right? Now, if you go and model each individual scale on a dragon's body, you're going to have a tremendous amount of poly count. It's going to slow down your system like crazy, right? So the question is, if the dragon is flying somewhere in the background, let's say a mile away from the camera, you can't see that detail. So why would you bother putting any of that in, right? Now, once every so often, the dragon passes the camera really close up and you see a few of the scales. So what you would do is you would think about your camera position shooting process. And what you would then do is say, okay, when do I need the high poly detailed? When do I need the low poly detail, right? So to get back to the situation, in a game environment with real-time rendering, you wouldn't know, right? Because the person playing the game is in control and they can move the person whatever they want, the character. So in a movie, you can do that. In a game, you can't. Now, I'm kind of all over the place. My apologies for that because I'm trying to think how to explain this, but let me know if that kind of answers that, all right? Let's see here. Let me throw on the new tune render and Arnold's. Okay, let me think about that, right? Is it necessary to make 3D model in its real world size? No, it's not. It is not. However, good question, by the way. Whenever you are, let's say, working in Maya, right, and you are applying lighting to your scene. Now, the lights used in Maya are based on real life scenarios. So if you apply a light and you put in, I don't know, 500 watts or whatnot, let's say on a light bulb, or let's say 60 watts. So you got a 60 watt light bulb, right? Now, people sometimes tend to model a city, but a city in inches or millimeters. So the city is this big, right? They put in one light bulb, 60 watts, and the whole scene is completely blown out. Way too much light going on, right? So what they would then do is they would say, okay, I need to build real life. And so suddenly they got something that's 500 meters, right? Or I don't know, half a mile wide. Now, what you need to do is you choose a scale, but then you have to recalculate lighting using the scene accordingly. Now, we just had a lighter here in the chat, then hopefully he can kind of confirm that that's the case, right? Okay, Kevin Scott here is saying, I love to draw human movement, but still confused to decide future in 3D. Should I go for character artist or character animator? Well, that's, first of all, a good question. And what I would do personally is, because we talked about being a generalist, right? Most animators that I know, they know to some extent how to model and texture and so forth. Because as an animator, you are working with people that build rigs and that model and so forth. Because the modeler will look at you for instructions. So how are you going to move my character as an animator? What do I need to include? Do I need to have more mesh under the arms and so forth and so on? If you don't understand the modeling process, how are you going to give them that advice, right? So what I would do is I would study the basics of modeling, texturing, lighting, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then specialize in animation. And that way you do it both. Let's see. Quick question. Is it possible to make wet maps in Maya without plugins? Well, I'm kind of worried about the word wet maps. So basically what you're saying is you want to, let's say, create rain or water simulation or whatever. I would use Bitfrost for that. Now, technically that is a plugin, but because it's now a standard piece of Maya, I wonder if you would still call it that, right? Other than that, I wouldn't use wet maps unless it was like a static wet floor, maybe, but nothing dynamically. I wouldn't do that. Let's see. And the game companies use 3D Max and movie guys. So Michael DeSanta is saying, I heard that game companies use 3ds Max while movie guys use Maya. Well, I would go as far as to say you probably heard incorrectly, right? Typically 3ds Max is used not in game scenarios, not in my experience anyway. Maya has two versions. You got Maya and Maya LT or Maya Lite. Maya Lite is specifically designed for game people, right? But more and more people are working strictly in the game engine because you can do so much more things now. Now, I see Maya in the movie industry way more than 3ds Max. 3ds Max is typically used in architecture, in product visualization, because they have very realistic rendering. Now, that's cool, but at the same time, that's also an impact from a render time standpoint, right? Let's see. Christian Hansen is saying, can I get your opinion on my portfolio website? Yes, you can. Just send me an email and I'll have a look, right? Okay, let's see. Kind of this type of live sessions every week. Well, I cannot promise you this every week, but I try to do them as often as I can, right? Do you think there's an age to be old in 3D animation? Yes, I think that starts at about 85, something like that. I'm just kidding, of course. What I'm saying here is if you are good in what you do as an animator, and trust me, it's very, very hard to find good animators. Experience is great. Now, you can have people that are 25, right? And that are at a skill level of somebody that's 50, right? And vice versa. So if you are able to do the work and it looks great, I wouldn't be too worried about that. So James McLean is saying loads of game studios are using 3ds Max. I agree with you, James. There are a lot that do that, but I'm trying to pick middle ground here. What is typically the case in the industry? So I'm not saying there are no game studios that do that. I would say the majority doesn't, right? Is that fair? Let's see. I want to start animation, Unreal Engine. Do you know something about the Unity shader graph? Well, I don't work in game engines a lot. Actually, I almost don't. That's how often I work in that. So I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. Okay, let's see. What else have we got? Any idea on how to get Boolean surface intersection? Well, I kind of stay away from Boolean altogether. I mean, I know that's supposed to be more stable nowadays, but it usually messes up your topology. And I would say that whenever possible, just try to avoid it altogether and achieve whatever you want to achieve manually, right? Okay, so which Maya render engine is best in all aspects? Well, I mean, as far as Maya renderers are concerned, when it comes to what comes with Maya, there's only one. That's Arnold, basically, right? I mean, what else is incorporated in the software? And of course, you have the Maya. I think it's Maya software, Maya hardware. I don't know anybody that uses those. Let's see. Okay, so what is my thought on Blender 2.8? Is it good to learn? Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, though, that once you commit to a platform, at least in my opinion, if you're spending time to learn Blender from scratch, you're probably going to stay in Blender and work in Blender from now on, right? Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. More and more people are using Blender, even in the industry. If you are doing so within the back of your head, what are your best chances in the industry? I would say it would probably be better to focus on something that is used more likely in the industry. So that would be 3ds Max or Maya, in my opinion, right? But, the good thing about Blender is it's completely free. I hear that 2.8 is awesome. So yeah, why not? Let's see. Do I think that Blender will become the standard of 3D? I do not. No. Yeah, I remember when it was Mental Ray too. I loved Mental Ray, and I was sad when it was gone. Well, you're very welcome, Richard. Let's see, tips and internship. Okay, so again, and I understand the question, and I'm saying again because I get this question every day, right? Internships when there are less studios. Well, first of all, why is everybody always talking about studios, right? Movie studios, game studios. There is such a huge world out there for 3D artists, right? Now, let's say you have a company that builds computers, right? I guarantee you they have a 3D department for product visualization, for product renderings. I talked to a company where they make light posts, so basically the street lighting, right? They got a 3D department. I talked a client of mine, they make baby products like the little pacifiers and whatnot. They got a 3D department. So all of these companies, right, they are looking for people to assist them in developing that whole department. So why not do that, right? Now, you maybe will say, well, but I don't want to work in a baby product company. I want to work in a movie company or whatever. Well, if you do your internship there, and it's more likely that you will get an internship there, you will have experience and it will be more likely for you to get hired once you want to go to that movie company, right? Let's see. How do I feel about Russians in foreign gaming companies? Why would I feel anything about Russians? What's wrong with Russians in foreign gaming? I don't understand the question. Let's see. Can I suggest an art college in India? Well, actually, I can, oddly enough. And for that, I quickly need to get a link. Hang on. All right, so excuse me. Here's a link to my website. And on that website, you will find a map of 3D universities worldwide, right? I've been asking people in my forum and on my channel, if they have where they went to college. And I plotted them on a map. So right now there are more than 100. And you can just check that out. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Would you say knowing how to draw is essential in complex 3D modeling? I would say knowing how to draw and actually being able to draw are two different things, right? The benefit of traditional drawing, and I did that a long time before I got into 3D, for me personally, is more that it will give you a better understanding of what's going on, right? I mean, from a perspective point, what they teach you when you draw in 2D, that's really not an issue in 3D because perspective is done for you, right? But drawing does help you to understand, for example, what lighting does, what shading does, give you more of a space awareness, how objects relate to each other in space and so forth. So for that reason, yes, I wouldn't worry about it if you are not perfect in drawing, but I would definitely read books about, composition and shading and lighting and related to drawing, okay? Let's see, Metal Death, you requested join the Facebook group. That's great. I'll see you there in a bit. Let's see, please teach Maya 3D modeling from basics. Well, McLean, I did 1,050 videos so far, and a lot of them are about basic 3D modeling in Maya. So please check that out. Let's see, Sam Gonzalez saying, do I need to know Photoshop at a professional level to get a job at a game studio? Do you have to? No. Would it help? It would help for you to understand how to, do most stuff in Photoshop. I wouldn't necessarily say on a pro level because that's a whole different game. But yeah, it's okay if you can work with that. Okay, Snappy is saying, what's better for modeling characters, box modeling in Maya or sculpting in ZBrush? Well, to be honest, both. And let me explain. There are two ways to go about this. One way is to start with your low poly in Maya, right? Bring that into ZBrush, and then based on that low poly, sculpt your high poly, and then do the baking process. The other option is to start directly in ZBrush, create a high poly model, right? And then retopologize that to create your low poly model. So it works both ways. So it's just a personal choice, what is more comfortable for you, but also if you're working for a game studio or a movie studio or whatnot, what is their process, right? So my advice would be learn both. Let's see. Job opportunities in the Netherlands. Also possible teach an art fundamental course of 3D modeling, lighting, texturing, etc. Well, Dula, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I am actually located in the Netherlands. And when it comes to jobs in the Netherlands, very, very, very limited. When we're talking about, being hired full-time as a 3D artist. When it comes to freelance work, yes, there's work out there. And as far as that course for 3D modeling and all that kind of stuff, I would advise you to either watch my YouTube videos, which is free, of course. If you are looking to go to college, for example, there are a couple of colleges in Holland, not a lot. And I would definitely advise you, if you're serious about this, to study in Munich. And I would go to the Medienhochschule in Munich, which is, in my opinion, one of the best that is somewhat in the area. And that will give you a very professional training, okay? Let's see, can I depend on, do you need more or less successful in the industry? Okay, so do I know any more or less successful 3D organic modelers in the industry that started out as a late bloomer? Okay, so basically that's a thing in Denmark. Well, the thing is this, though, you don't have to restrict yourself to Denmark. To give you an example, I live in Holland right now. I'm originally Canadian, but I live in Holland for a long time. And I have no clients in Holland, none, right? All of my clients are abroad. So I don't care about borders. I care about where the work is. And because I can work remotely, I really don't care, right? So why would you be so worried about, the situation in Denmark and what they think? So I would definitely not focus on that. Let's see. This is nonstop learning field we're into, and boy, I've learned useful Maya stuff from you for the last few years. Well, Jose, you are very welcome. Let's see. Alex is saying, can I do a character tutorial in ZBrush? Well, if you know my channel, you know that I typically don't do character stuff. Well, not full characters anyway. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, doing a character model in ZBrush, and I see people do that on YouTube, it's almost always a time-lapse video, right? They will do a video that took 4 or 6 or 10 hours. They will crunch it down to a 20-minute video. And in my opinion, they're useless because this is not an educational video. It's them showing you what they can do. My videos are not about showing you what I can do. My videos are about trying to teach you so you can do it, right? So the educational element for me is much more important than the end result of the model in the video, okay? Now, for that purpose, I will always try to take short videos that allow me to explain what I want to explain. And a character simply doesn't fit in there. Does that make sense? Let's see, rendering of water, fire, smoke, and other elements will make my PC freeze. Yeah, I can imagine that. Let's see. So, Million Polly, interesting name, is saying, I'm working for hard surface modeling for film and cinematics, but looks like no requirement for freshers on that things and any suggestions for jobs in that thing. Well, I guess I already gave you a couple of tips here. I mean, you're probably looking at, the film industry per se. I would try to build some experience outside of the film industry and then take that experience and try to get in that way, right? Okay, please show hotkeys so they appear in display when I'm uploading videos. Well, if you haven't noticed, whenever I do anything in my videos, I always say out loud what I'm doing. Now, some people find that very annoying. Other people find that very helpful, right? So I will say, Shift D to recopy, Control D to do this, Control Z to do that. So I'm saying that constantly, right? Let's see. For a fresher in 3D industry, would you suggest someone to self-learn things or go to a college or university? Interesting. So I will be talking at Animago in Munich, and that is going to be the topic of my speech. Exactly that, right? So what are the benefits of a college study over self-study and vice versa, all right? And I mean, you're asking me to answer that question. It's kind of hard because there's not a simple answer. There are pros and cons to both. Let's see. For starting point, I want the sculpt texture rig and animated character for a video game. I think it's a good idea to get me started. So Gustavo is saying, for a starting project, want the sculpt texture rig and animated character for a video game. Do you think it's a good start for the industry? Sure. I mean, anything that displays a lot of skills is good because they will know what you can do, and they will also have an idea of the flow, right? So let's see. Oh, so Dula is saying the name of the college, right? So I'll type it. So it's Median Hochschule. And that is in Munich. And if you want any information about them or a contact person, I'm friends with one of the professors there, right? So if you send me an email, hang on. If you send me an email, then I will introduce you to him and ask him to send you some information, right? Let's see. Is it worth learning Mel if you're focusing on character animation? Well, first of all, for those of you who don't know, Mel is a coding language. You got, for example, Python and Mel. Now, Python is more generic. Mel is Maya specific. It's a coding language, and it will help you to speed up scripts, right? Or write scripts, basically, for animation. So would it be helpful for you to learn that? It can't hurt. I would, if you have the time, I would definitely do that. Knowledge is always good. But if I were to learn a scripting language, I would go with Python because Python can be used in multiple platforms, not just in Maya, where Mel is specifically Maya only, right? Let's see. How to minimize motion blur during rendering in Mental Ray. How do you get motion blur in rendering unless you put it in there? Let's see here. Okay, so I got a question here in Russian. I have no idea what it says. Okay, so let's see. Do you think workflows like Maya, ZBrush, and Custom Painter can be overwhelming for a beginner? Is there any preferred workflow other than this? How does C4D play out for basic designs? Again, personal opinion here, and I don't want to offend people that use Cinema 4D, but when it comes to becoming a 3D artist, I think it's always a good idea to try to get the skills that are commonly used in the industry. And in most cases, that's 3ds Max or Maya, right? Combination of ZBrush, something like that, Houdini for node-based stuff. And these are just the big players, right? So is it overwhelming? Absolutely it is. I mean, it's not easy to become a 3D artist. It's a lot of work and it's very complicated and it can take a long time. Yeah. So let's see. Do I know any successful modelers that started out late? Well, let me ask you this. That kind of depends on whether you think I'm a successful modeler or not. But trust me, I started late, right? I mean, I started off as in 2D, and because of my age, the first time ever that there was actually something called 3D at all, 3D industry, I would say, is basically with the introduction of Toy Story 1 in 1995. Now, I don't want to scare you guys, but in 1995, when I first heard of that, right, and it was the first time ever that the world saw a full feature 3D film, right, I was 30 years old, right? So talk about starting late. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Snapchat is good. He picked up Python. Good. So human topology, any tips? Are we talking topology or anatomy? Two very different things. When it comes to human topology, if you are modeling a character and you're worried about a topology, it's very good if you are not the person that's going to animate it. Talk to the animator and ask the animator, how are you going to animate, right? If the animator says, well, this is going to be a very active figure that's going to be stretching and jumping and doing all sorts of superhero stuff, then the requirements are very different. You can have bending knees, bending elbows, and so forth and so on. If you have, let's say, a character with a lot of facial expression because of emotions or screaming or talking or whatever, you're going to have different things that you need to do as far as topology around the mouth for speaking, the jaw, and so forth and so on. So in short, talk to the animator and adjust your topology based on what the animator is going to do. Now, if there's not going to be any animation at all, if it's going to be a still render, that's a whole different thing. Let's see. Okay, so Anna Tofa is saying, don't translate that Russian sentence. Okay, well, if people get annoying, and I'll just throw them out, no worries. Let's see. Affordable mocap system. I really couldn't say. Sorry. Maybe somebody else here knows. Emil is saying, how do you create a sky with lighting or with plane? Usually, I would say with the plane. So HDR lighting is what I would use. And yeah, that's what I would do. When it's a still render, I might use a plane, but other than that. Okay, so suddenly we're getting a whole bunch of Russian stuff, and just out of curiosity here. Okay. All right, so how would I learn Substance Designer? How? Like everybody else, just start and watch YouTube videos. Let's see. Far Cry 5 was on a procedural level. Houdini, how much do you think this AI will approach it in the industry? Jobs like Retopo and rest at risk of replaced. Oh, complicated question. Okay, so procedural level design in Houdini, and whether that is the trend or not. I really don't know. I don't think so, to be honest. I know that Houdini is very, very strong in the FX, right? Basically any movie with, smoke and fire and whatnot, you're going to see Houdini. I think it requires a very different mindset. And maybe I'm wrong here. It's just my thought. Because Houdini, for me personally, doesn't feel as intuitive and as creative because it's node-based. It's more technical and mathematical. And I feel that a lot of people, for that reason, don't use it, right? It's not as visual. It's not as creative as other applications. So I don't see that happening just now, to be honest. Interesting. Apparently I look like Vin Diesel. I heard that before, and I don't I don't know if that's a compliment, but it's probably the bald head. I don't know. The character right from start to finish for a movie. Okay, that's a nice question. So what are the things needed for designing a character right from start to finish for a movie and an industrial based process? Let me get into that a little bit. Okay, so normally in the industry, you will have a story, right? A script or a story. So somebody wrote a story, or it's an existing book or anything like that. And somebody says, well, I'd like to turn this book into a movie, right? So that's where it starts. So usually they start by trying to find funding for that, because no money, no movie, right? So you find people that will invest the money, and then they say, okay, so now we got a script or an existing story or a book. We got some money. What we're going to do next? What we're going to do is we're going to start by thinking about how we can translate the story into a script. A script meaning character A says this, character B says that, so on, so on. Next shot, this happens. Next shot, that happens, right? Now, when that's all said and done, then you have an idea of the characters, and then you get concept artists to come up with the design for that. So they will have a number of drawings and sketches and so forth, and maybe even clay models, and they say, okay, well, this is how I visualize the character. And then they will compare it to the story, they will talk about it, they will change it and change it and change it and change it. And once they have a better understanding of that, what they would typically do is kind of a rough version in 3D, so like a block out. And they will talk about, okay, what does this character have to do later on in the movie as far as movement, as far as, overall look and feel. And then they just keep on modeling and adjusting that until they have the final product. So it's kind of a long process, and there's all sorts of stuff that goes on there. Let's see. What is better to learn, Nuke or Fusion? That really depends on the circumstances. I can't answer it like that. Let's see. Rating will be improved. Cinema 4D, not really my thing. What's the ideal length for animated short film? I would say anything under 10 minutes. Nati Mohanty, thank you. Let's see, guidelines related to production pipeline and game prop. Okay, so what does CFX stand for, right? Well, FX stands for FX, as in the word FX, right? And so basically character effects. Okay, so would I have any comment about converting point cloud photogrammetric scans into 3D solid mesh? Well, I don't know what kind of comment you're looking for. I know that the software is improving every day, and it's becoming easier to do that. You even have handheld tablets with simple applications that can do that. The key here is that people are concerned that they're going to lose their job as a 3D modeler because of this. I don't think so, because a scan is not creative. A scan scans whatever is there, but you need the creative element as a 3D artist to be able to do that kind of stuff, right? Let's see. Do I think drawing lessons can help better texture and more while sculpting 3D model? Okay. Well, I talked about drawing before. If you're asking whether it would be a good idea to get sculpting lessons, as in real life clay sculpting, to improve your sculpting skills, for example, in ZBrush, oh, definitely, I would do that. Okay, can I tell something about 2D animation, and is it still viable? It is. It is definitely. The reason why is because, for example, motion graphics to some extent is also 2D animation, right? Now, when we think about 2D animation, we think about, cell animation and, painting every slide one by one, or doing it in something like Toon Boom, right, software. But it's used on TV every day. It's used in commercials every day. It's used in business presentations every day. It's used in training videos in hospitals and businesses and so on. So it's all over the place, right? So if that's your thing, for sure. And if you at some point decide you want to get to 3D animation, you already have all the bases to do that. Let's see, guys. I want to do another 5 minutes or so. We've been going on way over an hour. So let me see if we can do a couple of more questions, right? Okay. Cool lessons. Do I think AI will eliminate modeling and UVing? I do not. Initially, skill set to start as a 3 areas. Can they apply if my workflow isn't very fast? Okay, so if you apply for a job as a junior artist, it is not necessarily about you being fast, for the simple reason that you don't have the experience yet. So they will kind of expect you to not be fast. What's important, though, is your learning ability. So if your baseline work is okay for your level, you're willing to learn, and you learn and grow fast enough, you should be okay. Okay, my 2019 has sculpting options like ZBrush. Should I still use ZBrush? Well, if you have ZBrush, I would definitely advise that. If you don't, use Maya. What do I think about starting a professional career from apprenticeship in award-winning studio? Well, if you are an apprentice in an award-winning studio, good for you. If you can translate that into a job, even better. Let's see. So, Peter, I hope I say this right. It's fortunate that there are no such teachers in the Russian community. Thank you for the opportunity to improve. Well, that's the good thing about the online community nowadays. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you are. If you have access to a computer and you can follow stuff like this or other broadcasts, right? You're good. So how often do I do these Q&As? As often as I can. I wouldn't say they're weekly or so, but I try to at very least do once a month, sometimes scheduled. And this time it wasn't scheduled, and I just, had some time, so I thought, why not? So yeah, kind of hard to say. Okay, what should I look for in a laptop? Planning to have it for 3D software. Well, first of all, the specifications for what you need to run my 2019 can be found on the Autodesk website. I'm always curious why people want to use a laptop instead of a main system. If you absolutely need to be mobile, then I understand. But other than that, I would use a fixed system, because it is way, way more affordable when you need to upgrade, right? And you have more abilities to upgrade. Let's see, when it comes to the question, After Effects, is that outdated? Absolutely not. It is not outdated at all. I mean, it's a very effective tool, and I use it quite a lot. Okay, let's see if we can do one more question, guys, and then we'll call it a day. Been at it for an hour and 15 minutes, so cool. Okay, so how long have I been making videos on YouTube? I did my first video in 2013. So I did 1,050 videos so far. And according to YouTube, if you watch all my videos one after the other, and no, actually the total amount of viewing time, that's what it was. The total amount of viewing time of my videos back to back is 89 years. So that's kind of cool. Let's see. So Kevin is saying, will I be doing podcasts on YouTube? Well, it depends on what you mean by podcast. If you mean this live stream, these live streams are live when they're live. After they're done, they're not on YouTube, right? I make them available to my patrons because I feel, due to their financial support, they help me to do this. I make them available for them. And yeah, they seem to appreciate that. And it's a give and take, right? Let's see, guys. One last question. Let's see. Okay, let's do this as the last question. So, do I primarily do modeling or animation, or do I pretty much do everything, right? Well, I would say that I basically do three things in a week. Well, four, right? So one is I work as a consultant, right? So I help companies, but I also help individual 3D artists to develop their career or their business, right? So I will do sessions with 3D artists worldwide where they will say, okay, how do I develop my freelance business? How do I develop my network? How do I develop my personal branding? How do I move from one area to the other, and so forth? So that's what I do. I work with companies that want to transition into digital workflow or want to have people trained for that. So that whole consultancy, mentorship, personal teaching kind of thing is one thing I do. The second thing I do is my photography business. So I am also a photographer, and I do wildlife and nature photography and also photography classes. I also have a photography YouTube channel for those of you who don't know. So that's the second thing. Third thing is I work as a freelance 3D artist, where I will create whatever they might need. And usually it's hard surface modeling. I don't do a lot of stuff for the game industry. I would say that's a very, very limited, but hard surface modeling. And then, of course, the YouTube channel and the YouTube videos. Now, these videos take a lot of time. I would say maintaining my YouTube videos, my YouTube channel will cost me somewhere around 3 full days a week, right? So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, guys. Well, that's it for this session. I will do another one soon. Thank you all so much. 58 people online. Very cool. Yeah, check out my Facebook Hangout group if you haven't already. Please check out my new website. Yeah, I'm kind of proud of that. I made it myself. And if you have any tips or questions or anything like that, let me just post a link here. So this is that's the link to the website. So if you want to check that out, that'd be good. And yeah, that said, thank you so much. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Welcome, welcome. Bye, guys.